I'm Amy L., and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks so much for having me, y'all. This is just, I can't even tell you how grateful I am to be here today, to be alive today, to be in Jonesboro. I was born at St. Bernard's in 1971. What a blessing it is to be here with y'all today, and such a great group. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be scared as shit. But, I'm going to do this because I have to give it away to keep it. And I love to give it away. And that's why I'm alive today. So thanks for everybody in the committee that put this thing on. I know it was a lot of work. Y'all have done a great job. Thank you for the care package. Thank you for the warm welcome. The talks that I've gotten to hear for last night with Tony and today with Sylvia was just fantastic. A lot of heart and a lot of love. And most of all, not most of all, but equally as important, is my love of my father, who's here today, and my brother, and my sponsee, China. Yeah, wow. To have a family that's had the recovery that mine has is miraculous and totally God-given and divine grace, and I'm humbly aware of that, and I'm extremely grateful. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. So let's see. Before I go into my story, I want to talk a little bit about this process of saying yes. Like, I don't know who was in charge when I answered yes to Craig when he asked me to do this 6 months ago. I've been trained and taught in the program that you never deny a reasonable request. And so when he where are you, Craig? There you are. When he put a little line out to me on Facebook saying, hey, we're getting this convention going, and you got any ideas? How about you? Would you like to do it? I was like, tag, I'm it, So, but the process of saying yes has brought about a tremendous impact on my recovery today, and my sobriety, and my conviction, and my desire to be sober. It has inspired me to double down, triple down, quadruple down, because I don't want to sit up here and talk about something that I'm not living. This program is everything to me. Without it, I'm dead. So I value, so what I did was I'm like, okay, I say yes, it's 6 months down the line, I don't need to worry about it for right now, but I did take it as an opportunity to learn more about this program. And I'm already pretty in the books, but I went and read the books again. I listened to them on audio tapes, I read them, and I took notes. And I immersed myself into the fellowship of AA more in Little Rock, and I met with some of the old timers, and I got their wisdom and their prayers, and I got their advice, and I got their confidence. So even though I'm scared, I know I'm really supported. And so just wanted the process has been really neat for me. This program lives and breathes daily for me, and it grows. And it has been a really great way for me to see what I still am not, what am I still holding on to? And I'm still holding on to a lot. I mean, this self ain't going to die anytime soon. But I'm in a better position to look at it and to see it and to be aware of it and to say, I have a higher power that I can do business with. I have a God that I can turn these things over. I don't have to do it alone anymore. So it's been a really, really great teaching opportunity for me to be asked to do this. Water. Okay, so that aside, all right, so I was born in 1971 at St. Bernard's Hospital to Ann and David Lacer. My mom is also a big Al-Anon person. In fact, her sponsor was Sylvia. So this is just gift upon gift for me to be able to stand here and talk to you all today. So I was born to a family of 4, my mom and dad, and I'm the youngest of 3. I have an older brother over here in recovery as well, David, and my sister Laura. And there comes Amy. You know, I guess I would explain my childhood is busy. I mean, there was a lot going on in my house. And I was the youngest, and from my perspective, I struggled to get enough attention. Let's just say that. My perspective has changed. I'm no longer a victim of my circumstances of being the baby. I was spoiled rotten, let's just be honest. I had everything I needed in my family. You know, my dad was a hard worker, still is. And my mom was a great domesticated woman. She had her degree in home economics, and she had been a teacher, and she was engaged in social and civic things. And I really admired both of them, and I still do. And my brother and sister were, you know, brother Dave is 8 years older than me, and my sister was 4 years older than me, so I was the runt. You know, and I was the one that they kind of would like you when they didn't have their friends to hang out with, and then when their friends were around, you weren't a part of their life. You know, they didn't even own you. So, but more than anything else, I grew up in an alcoholic home. So that has its stuff. You know, unpredictable, chaotic, lots of conflict. Presence and absence, but you didn't know when it was going to hit, you know. All my needs were provided for. I mean, well taken care of, well fed, well clothed, and like I said, pretty spoiled. But there was that sense of our lights are on, but nobody's home kind of thing. And so I don't know. I like to think of myself as a different kind of kid when I was little, but I think I'm pretty much like every one of you. You know, I felt like a square peg in a round hole. I mean, like I was weird and you could all see it. You know, I just felt in the world, but not of the world, and it wasn't in the kind that you feel spiritually good about. You know. And so, you know, I did what little kids did. You know, I observed a lot, being the youngest child. I observed what my parents were doing. I could kind of get the gauge when they were happy. I could get the gauge when they weren't happy. I watched my brother go out and play mud football, my sister do her things, and I watched y'all's patterns and behaviors, and I figured out where could I get my needs met? What did I need to do? How did I need to modulate myself in order to get what I wanted or needed? And I learned that pretty early on, and I also was very shy, and I didn't like being the center of attention. I never have. Yet it's probably a denied yearning, you know, kind of one of those. So I did that, and I felt odd. I felt outer-worldly, and I spent a lot of time in my imaginary world. I had an imaginary friend. I had a stuffed animal, and I always sought something greater than what I could see to help, because I did feel a sense of sadness when I was little, and I felt lonely within myself, and I felt like I wasn't good enough. Like, how many times have we heard that? So that was kind of just existing. But I did come up in a family of alcoholism, so there was a lot of alcohol around. I felt a sense of connection and peace when I was laying in my mom's lap in church. You know, when I was sitting on my dad's lap, and he was probably when he was having a drink, because he was going to be more calm, probably. And he was going to be home, and maybe he was going to be talking to some friends, and it was going to be more jovial. But those times, sitting on their laps, getting with my grandparents, going for walks, picking the persimmons, and talking about God. They're the ones who talk to me about God. I felt a sense of peace when I was outside in the woods, building forts. I felt a sense of peace when I was drawing or painting. And that's something that's been a very huge part of my life, is drawing and painting. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've survived all this rough road, because that's something that my mom and my dad discovered in me early on and nurtured, as well as my love for music and things of that nature, athletics. So I've got all this mixed bag of nuts going on. I just feel weird about being alive. I feel like I don't fit in. Couple that with mom and dad are in the middle of a separation when I'm about 3, and my dad's managing some apartments and he lives there, and I get to stay with him a few hours on the weekends or whenever. My memory's patchy. I was only 3 to 5. But that's when I had my first drink. That's what I'm trying to get to. I had my first drink when Dad was working on the apartments, and I was sitting out by the pool with a bunch of people that lived there, and Dad always got a keg for the place. He was a good landlord. Yeah, he was the cool kind. And so I'm wanting to be like the grown-ups, okay? I wanted to be like a grown-up from the minute I came out, according to my mother. I didn't like wearing diapers. I ripped those things up. I mean, you weren't going to tell me what to do. I had my own path, and I was going to do it. If you're in my way, get out, And so I see all these grown-ups drinking from these cool cups, and I got a vivid imagination, and so I'm thinking those cups look neat, that big keg looks neat, they all look like they're laughing and having a good time. I want to be a part of that. So it was a hot day, and I went and grabbed me a couple of glasses. I learned how to maneuver it and all that. So I don't remember much. A lot of this has been retold to me, but I did have the memory the first time I went to treatment when I was 16 that this happened. So I think it has some measure of accuracy. I drank a couple of glasses, I guess. I just remember falling in love at first sight. It's like the Jerry Maguire movie. You had me at hello. I mean, I was just like, this is it. I don't remember the flavor, whether I liked it or not. I remember it's hot, and that made me cold. And I remember that it was golden in color and foamy. And I remember that it smelled kind of good. And I remember the cups and what they looked like. And they had that wood paneling on them. And I just remember it was like a sense connection at that point. And I never forgot it. Now, that doesn't mean that I started being like a major drinker at age 3. But it didn't take long. And it didn't take long because it was around. It was around, and I knew that I wasn't the only one that it was changing the way they felt. I saw it going on in my family. We had lots of parties, and we always had parties at Christmas. Seems like there were some other parties here and there, but I always knew where it was because, it was on the top shelf right next to the milk. The wine was. So I don't know when I started going and partaking, but I know that by the time I was 8, I was regularly. And I know that I would look forward to our Christmas parties because of 2 things. One is I love decorating the house with all the nativity scenes. I had this fascination for the nativity scenes, and Mom and that was a time I could be with my mom. And I also loved the fact that we had champagne punch. And so I drank that. I drank the champagne punch, and the parents just didn't notice. You could pull off a lot. So, and my brother and sister would probably drink it. I don't know. I just was concerned about getting mine, really, to be honest with you. And then, so that continued, and it wasn't a daily thing, but it was. I got the message that stuff was going to be a part of my life, and it was here to stay. And I was going to, anytime I could find it, I would. I started really partaking in regular drinking, and I say regular, probably every weekend, when I was about probably 10 or 11, and I'd figured out the patterns and the rhythms to the purchasing of alcohol. I knew when Dad would go to the liquor store. I knew about how much he had in his medicine cabinet and about how much I could take. And I got my little mason jars, and I'd fill them up with some moonshine, and I'd get my girlfriends, and we'd go out to the woods, build forts, and drink. So that was something that I had my world expanded, and my imagination was fired, and I felt free of fear, and creative, and like I was part of the world, finally. So you don't forget that easy. You don't forget it. And so from that point on, this thing progressed. Alcohol is my primary addiction. It's my primary issue, but that's not all I ended up using. I ended up using a lot of other things, and alcohol was the beginning for me. So my sister and brother were some gay. They were party. They helped me to party. Let's just say that. I can't say it any other way except they were partying and I got in on it. I started being interested in boys real quickly after starting to drink. I never not had a boyfriend. It was going from one person to the other. I felt like I was a grown-up. I was able to have a fake ID by the age of like 15 and go to Truman or Wiener, and they didn't ask anything. And they looked really fake back then. Is probably Craig remembers. Like, I don't know how we got by with it, but we did. We did. So, all right. Let me. Where do I want to go from here? So, I started using more frequently, but I couldn't drink every day. So that's when I found marijuana. Because that's something I can do every day, nobody's going to know. I can do it in a variety of places, too. Then you got to deal with, got to go to school. How am I going to drink and drug while I'm at school? Well, luckily, my dad, was kind of had an interest in medicine at one point. And had a variety of pills and supplements underneath his laboratory in the bathroom. And so he had these smelling salt things. So I took those to class, and I'd go to the bathroom and, and go back to class. So basically I was getting anything and everything I could get my hands on, drinking every weekend. This was starting to show up a little bit in my world, and in the sense that I was about 13 or 14, and I was skipping school more than I was attending. I was writing fake notes from signing my parents' signature and all that. I was taking money out of their wallets, and I was flunking out of classes. And the teachers were worried, and they were saying, "What's going on?" They were having conferences with my parents. She's an underachiever. Like, we think she's probably got something going on up there, but we're not seeing it in the classroom. Well, I was just worried about having boyfriends and partying, and that was it. And getting away from my family, too. I wanted to get away from them. So progression is a part of this disease, and I progress quickly. Tolerance is a part of this disease, and my tolerance just blew out. I mean, very quickly. I think by the time I was 16 and I gave this up for the first time, I was like 90 pounds and able to drink like a case of beer at a time. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. But it stopped being so fun. I started being a slave to it. I had to have it. I had to have something to change the way I felt every day by the age of 14 or 15. I was getting in a lot of trouble. My manipulation tactics weren't working. They'd sent me to therapy. They were trying to tell me to look in the mirror and say, I love you, I'm proud of you to myself, and build my self-esteem. They figured I had a self-esteem issue. And then I was depressed. Mom and Dad were checking my breath when I'd come in at the end of the night, and I was having to sit down and have a conversation with them. So that's okay. I can work around that. I'll just stop drinking at 10, start doing the mints, clear up a little bit, go have the check-in with Mom and Dad, and then night, and then go down, and when the AC goes on, sneak out the door. So my nights were long. I was sneaking out most every night, skipping school a lot, lying, cheating on exams, doing whatever was under the sun to get my drink or my drug. At that point, it was really, it was alcohol, and then I was using some other party favors on the regular. And I was depressed. I might not have shown y'all that on the outside, although I think people could see it. I couldn't. But no amount of alcohol could make me feel, it's like it all of a sudden turned on me. We had this really good relationship for a while, and it was fun, and I found freedom in it, and then all of a sudden it flipped, and I felt more out of this world, more lonely, more isolated, more weird, more square peg and round hole, more than I'd ever even felt as a child. And yet I couldn't stop starting. I couldn't stop starting. So, but there would be periods where so from between 15 and 16, I had suicidal thoughts every day, every single day. I thought about how could I do it, what's, like, is there any other way? No, there's no other way. I'm not meant for this world. I'm a slave to this. I mean, I didn't know that I was an alcoholic, but I knew that I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough. That's what I knew. And so, I'd contemplated committing suicide for a long time. And I was in therapy, and I'd been put on an antidepressant. And the doctor said, we really got to watch your levels with this medication, because if you take too much, it can give you a cardiac arrest. And where some people may see that as a sign of caution and like take it and be like, oh, okay, we really need to be careful, I saw it as a ticket out. So I committed that to memory. And so at the age of 16, or shortly before, I had gone out one night, and I was listening to Aerosmith Dream On, I remember. And I was just like, it's time to go. I can't do this. And so I went home and checked in with my parents. I was drunk, but manageably drunk, because I drank. I wasn't one that just started late and hit it till I blacked out. I dripped all day long as I could, whenever I could, in and around school. However I worked it out. And I remember I was sitting with friends, and they were all having fun, and all I could think about was dying. And I had remembered that I had filled my prescription that day. And so I got home, and to make this story quick, my dad had found out that I had snuck out, and he came down. He was mad. He was mad, and he came down, and I was busted, and he found my stash, and he flushed it. And talk about mad. I was mad, and it was two mad people screaming at each other. And that's all. That gave me the courage somehow to do the next move. The next move, when we had our fight, and I think I told him I hated him, and he left the room, and I had that prescription, and I just bottoms up, took the whole bottle, 37 pills. And the next morning, which wasn't long because I'd gotten in the middle of the night, the next morning, my dad had heard my alarm going off because I worked for him. I was actually the receptionist in his law firm, and I don't know how that pulled off, because I brought bottles like this full of vodka to the front stand. And I wasn't waking up. So Mom and Dad, Dad came and tried to wake me up, and I was unconscious. Okay, so that day I ended up going into cardiac arrest. And and that day I ended up at St. Bernard's. And my mother drove the car, and my dad held me in the back seat, to the best of what I've been told. And I had gone unconscious, and it required the shocks and the chest compressions and everything like that. And my heartbeat stopped for 45 minutes that day. And the hospital had pretty much closed the books on the situation, done what they could do. And to the best of what I've been told, my parents were both standing over me in the room, grieving this moment and seeing me as dead and gone. And all of a sudden, I just saw myself floating over me and the table and my parents, and I heard them saying, "Don't go, please don't go." And I opened my eyes and said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here." I heard what they were asking me, and I entered into my body, and I opened my eyes, and my parents were just like, I don't know what was going on in their minds. That's their story to tell, but what I know is that when I woke up, I was willing. I was willing to do something different. And so from that, and the wild thing is there was a lot that went down during that, okay? Like, my mom, I opened my eyes, dad or mom said, "Are you ready to get some help?" I said, "Yes, get me there as soon as you can." And then my mom said, Did you have something happen? And I said, "Yes." And then a journal was provided, and I wrote down in that journal exactly what happened to me when I was without a heartbeat. And I did have a spiritual experience at that time, and I did meet the God of my understanding that day. And I wrote it down, and I read it last night before I came here to talk to y'all, and I just was like, wow, like I cried with gratitude. And I didn't, and I lost, and so I was ready to go to treatment, so I got sent off. There was a wonderful doctor at St. Bernard's, and they're amazing. The people that worked with me and my family are amazing. I mean, just amazing. And there was a psychiatrist there that was new in psychiatry. I think it was his first job, and he made the recommendation to my mom and dad that I go to Hazelden. And so, that is a man that I have been able to reconnect with through the beauty of this program over the last 2 years, and that's been fantastic. Yeah, and it's just been such a neat reconnection, and I didn't remember him at that time. So I got sent off to Hazelden, and I'd like to say that I didn't drink again between the OD and Hazelden, but I'm fairly certain I did. I drank and probably smoked weed. But once I got to treatment, the obsession was removed, and I did a 28-day program at age 16, and I did my fifth step with a priest there. I was walking on cloud 9. I was walking on cloud 9. Like, I was levitating. I mean, like, the experience that I had, I couldn't get it. It was just right here in my face. It was in my consciousness, and I was ready. I felt like a different person. And so I did treatment. I did a halfway house. I had some of the times of my life up there in Minnesota. This is the first book that I got in 1987, which was my first time sober. And I had an incredible experience. I didn't go to a traditional high school, but I went to the school of AA. And that's when I fell in love with this program, and that's when I realized to the deepest, innermost parts of myself that I was indeed an alcoholic, and that I came from an alcoholic family. And so at that point, I worked the steps. I had a wonderful, I've been blessed by so many incredible women in this program. I mean, just amazed. And I had a great counselor, and she taught me a lot about myself. She taught me about my reverse pride, that I was the worst one in the world, and how was that self-centered? She taught me that. She taught me about my envy and my jealousy. She taught me how I was pulling myself away from the world, how I set that wheel in motion. She taught me about faith without works is dead. I'm like, what does that even mean at that time? We got to the third step, and I started experiencing a psychic change. And I realized, okay, it's this action stuff. It's this action stuff that's the works. just an incredible experience up there, and I stayed up there for 3 years, and I completed I got a high school diploma in an alternative school, and I got to complete my first year of college for free by the state of Minnesota because my teacher looked out for me and got me a grant. And then I returned to Little Rock. So from the time I was 16 to the time I was 37 years old, I stayed sober. 100% sober. No mood or mind-altering chemicals, and I never wanted to drink. I didn't have urges. I didn't have an obsession. I was grateful to be sober, and I did a lot of things in that 23 years. But I will say when I moved back to Arkansas, I got away from AA. It lost its priority. I got interested in a boy again. And I met him when I was 18, and he became my husband. And I spent 18 years with him, and he is not one of us. He's very vanilla and very normal and very kind. John Boy from the Waltons is the best way to describe him. And he was leveling for me and stabilizing, and he deserves a Medal of Honor for the things that he walked through with me, because I was tore up from the floor up, as my sister sponsor says. My self-esteem, my insecurities, I felt like everything was on the outside. I had that dynamic going, but I also had this God dynamic going. I never had both of them living in me at the same time. I did feel like a changed person, but I still struggle with my character defects and my ego. So I did a lot. I had sponsors in the program. I had 2 sponsors when I was in Minnesota, and I got a sponsor when I moved back to Little Rock, but I didn't stick with her. I got scared. I got scared of the AA, and I'll be honest with you, one of the things that I was scared of as an 18-year-old in Little Rock AA was the men. The old-timers, the old guys. I don't know if they were old-timers or not, but the 13-stepping was kind of scary for me. And to be honest, I don't even know if that was just my perception or if that was real. But I was real sensitive to it. And maybe I was looking for an excuse to bag out. I don't know. But I was into this love thing with my boyfriend. And so I did a lot, even though I didn't work this program. I did a lot in that 23 years. I got my bachelor's degree. I got my master's degree. I opened a business and ran it successfully. I had my first son, Jacob, who's now 20. Got married before I had the child. And I did a lot of things. And I got a lot of letters behind my name. But it came to the point where that didn't feel like it was good enough. I felt like a big phony. I felt like I had all these letters and it was never enough. I was never enough. No amount of knowledge or information or accolades could I get and feel it. I couldn't feel it. I still felt empty. And I didn't, and obviously I'd come so far away from the program, there wasn't a sponsor to reach out to. I hung around with a lot of normal drinkers, you know. And I looked out here for why things weren't feeling right. You know, it was this John Boy from the Waltons' husband. He's pulling me down. Well, I started getting into a lot of pre-lapse behaviors. Credit cards. Didn't pay sales tax in the state of Arkansas. Leaving for long periods of time, not to really do anything too bad, but just not wanting to tell my husband where I was. Then I did get into traveling, and then I did get into some emotional affairs, and some of them led to more than that. I got into running, fighting, and hiding again. And I felt empty, and I felt lonely, and I felt like people didn't see the real me, didn't know the real me, and I felt like I knew what the reason for all this was. It was just a bad marriage. It's just a bad marriage. I'm sober. I've done all that work. It's just a bad marriage. Well, anyway, so I go to therapy. I get feathers dusted over me, go to the shamans, massages, all this, trying to help me get this marriage idea off of me. And so I did. I initiated a divorce back in 2009, and that set in motion. And within like 2 months, I lost my business because, state of Arkansas wanted their money. And one of the girls that worked with me was like, "You're acting crazy. I don't want to work for you anymore." And she went out and took her people with her. And all of a sudden, I was like really losing my shit. Like stuff was starting to fall around me. And I divorced my anchor. So like, wow, cart before horse, big time. I mean, like all of a sudden I came to in something that was totally falling apart. And so I was starting to date. So I got to find me another guy. This is the solution. I got to find me the right guy, get me a different boyfriend. And so I started dating, and again, no cravings for alcohol. And then I go on a date, and we're having Japanese, and he says, "Why don't you have some sake with me?" And I said, "Okay, seems like a good idea to me." And that was the beginning of it having me at hello again. It took a year and a half or two to become a daily pattern for me, but immediately the obsession of the mind began. Immediately. It was about how can I control it? Well, I'll just drink organic wine, and I'll just drink on Wednesdays. I'll just drink when I go out with the Divorced Wives Club on Thursdays. Then every day there was an add-in. There was an add-in. I'll just drink clear vodkas, clear liquids. I'll only do it after 5. All of that. I went through all of the moderation attempts, and none of them worked. They didn't work for very long anyway. So I from there it became a 7-year run. A 7-year run. Everything that I had in the first bout of my drinking and drugging continued in the second, only probably about 50 times worse. This talk about the disease doing push-ups in the parking lot is no joke for me, for this girl. I suddenly was willing and eager to do things I had never done, and I just claimed that I was taking time off for good behavior. And I felt that liquid courage again. And I felt like I didn't have to really worry about my past failings. And I felt like I could get the guys and all of the same thing. So that began somewhere around 2010 when I got a divorce, and it continued until 2017, which my sobriety date is March 28, 2017. The alcohol progressed into cocaine. The cocaine progressed into methamphetamine and other additives, but the methamphetamine is what ended up getting me back here. In 2017, March 15th, 2017, my world changed dramatically and quickly. I became unable to work really quickly. I became unable to care for my son really quickly. Even when he had cancer, I was unable to be there for him. That's part of my story. I became unable to be without a man. I couldn't be by myself. I was injuring myself. I was falling off curbs, drunk, twisting my ankles. My legs were going numb. I was sick. I got up, and and there were periods of time where I worked, but I would get alcohol just to get to work. So I was an all-day drinker and an all-day drugger. And my relationships and my circles of people changed and narrowed more and more. And once you get into that drug world, there's a lot of dark. There's a lot of dark. And for me, it involved me being a part of a lot of criminal activities, selling drugs, using drugs, stealing. It was a dirty life, and it was a life I was a part of, and I hooked up with people who were well versed in that life because they had what I wanted. They had the drugs. So alcohol's always been a part, but the meth is what brought me in because I got caught up in a bust. So in 2017, a couple weeks before I claimed my sobriety date this time around, I was the only one in the house, and 13 men in black came and busted the windows and doors open. And I'm down on the floor with AK-47s pointed at my head. Terrified. I'd been wanting to get sober for about 6 or 8 months. Prior to that, I'd been praying, actively praying, get me sober, help me stay sober. Just please, God. Well, that's how I got it. That's how I got it. An act of providence and the gift of desperation and a moment of clarity. I mean, nothing can make you more clear than a bunch of guns around you. Nothing can make it. So everything that happened from that point forward was, it's crystal clear to me, because I got put in jail. I got charged with 13 felonies at that moment. I didn't have a police record. I didn't have a record. I'd spent maybe 3 hours in jail before that time. I'm in there. Everybody can see the truth of me, and I can too. And man, it doesn't look good. And I'm not going to survive this again. And I was right back to the same mental state that I was when I was 16. It just had gone full circle, and I was thinking the only way out is death. If I hadn't been arrested, I probably would have tried to kill myself or the guy that I was with. That's how bad it was. I was mentally insane. And I got it, and luckily I was put in jail. I was held for my safety, and that's exactly what it was. I was held for my safety and the safety of others. And I ended up in there for 7 days, and the first day I had thoughts of jumping off the second floor of the cell block, because I just didn't know how I was going to be able to walk out of there with all that and look at my son in the eye. There's just no way. I can't survive this. This is too much. And I was crying, and I mentioned this to the inmates. Now, before I'd ever been to jail, I was terrified of jail, and the thing I was terrified of more than anything were the inmates, because I thought they were going to beat me up. And it was the inmates that were my angels in the outfield. It was the thing that I feared the most. That was the thing that brought me to God. And those women saw me crying, and they literally kind of slapped me in the face and grabbed me and said, "Stop crying, wipe away your tears, turn your will and your life over to God. Surrender. Go to church. We have church every other hour over here. The women come in, go." And they went with me. And and that's step 1, 2, and 3 for me, second time around. And so I went with them to church, and I got down on my knees, and I let the women speak in tongues over my head. I didn't care what they were selling. I was ready. I was taking it, and I was receiving it again. I was receiving it. And then I had the courage, and then I just couldn't make it work out that I could get the call. I can only make one call. There's only 2 numbers I ever remember when I get in trouble. One is my dad's, and the other is my ex-husband's. I wasn't going to call him. So my bail bondsman or somebody, I don't know, somebody gets a phone into me, a mobile phone into me, and says, "You can make your one call." I think I'd been in there about 3 days. And I make that call to my dad. Ooh, I was just head held low, there's no way. I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to tell him. And I said, "Dad, I'm in a lot of trouble." And he said, "Okay, where are you?" "In the county jail." Well, I think he heard that I was in jail because of the way the calls do. And he said, "All right, you got yourself in a mess, did you?" And I said, "Yeah, and I'm ready for help. I'm ready to go to treatment." And he said, "Well, okay, well, I'm happy you surrendered and that you're asking for help. We'll get through this." And he said, "And I will come bail you out and take you to treatment. when I get back from vacation. When I get back from, he knows his program. He knows his program. And I've skipped over it, but there's been countless times that Dad's come and got me from Little Rock and tried to help me get clean. That's my man over there. So he says, after I get back from vacation, and I'm like, really? You gonna make me stay in this place with these people? Yeah, I'm one of these people. So it was a very humbling experience. It was a very ego-deflating experience. Need I say more about that? And I stayed in there for 4 more days. So 7 days is what I stayed in there. But the amazing thing was it looked a lot like my spiritual awakening that I'd had when I was 16. In my spiritual awakening when I was 16 and died, it was the nativity scene where I met Jesus. In the jail, at that time it was a jail. It wasn't a barnyard, or it wasn't a farm experience. It was a jail with bars where I couldn't get out. And the angels that were in my experience when I was 16 were the inmates. And I could see it. It was just like, boom, 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 this is happening again to me. And so every single night, and where I saw in that experience when I was 16, I saw the lights and the colors and the bliss and the opulence. Every single night I was in jail, I had dreams like that. And so when I finally did get out, and I went to Jackson, Mississippi for treatment. And I had been in an incredibly toxic relationship and kind of a cult-like life for a couple of years before getting sober. And I had a lot of trauma. I was very shell-shocked. I just was seeing things. My mind wasn't right. I was twisted up. And I went to an all-women's treatment facility in Jackson, Mississippi. And I did a 45-day program, and then I went from there to a sober house for women. And I stayed there for, I think, 4 months. And then I continued to live in Jackson until I had a year of sobriety. And through that first year, I had to come back a lot to Little Rock for court. A lot of court dates. And during those court dates, I didn't do any of this alone. Because the help was there. The help's always been there for me when I was ready and opened my eyes to see it and receive it. And I, my dad would go with me to court. My brother went, my sister went, my godmother went, a friend of mine in AA went. I got a sponsor in Jackson. I started working the steps. Even though I'd taken step 1, 2, and 3 in jail, I took them again. What's wrong with taking them again? I need a lot of insurance on this life, I've got to work against the fact that I've got a chronic fatal disease. And so we did the steps again, and I admitted to my innermost self that I was powerless, and I had no problem seeing the unmanageability. And then this coming to believe thing, it's like, well, I failed God. So I believe there's a God for y'all, but He's not going to accept me after I've done all this messing up. And so rather than to wrestle with that too much, I just shared that with people. I shared that I was ashamed and I was remorseful, and I'd failed my son. I'd failed God. I'd turned everything around. And so
38 minutes so far.
38.
You're right at time.
Okay, I'm going to hurry. And so I realized that I had, I had to just look at God with skin on at that point. And that's in the fellowship of AA. And I found that my higher power came to me through you all. And that was enough of a start to get me on my way. And from there, I basically pummeled through the steps the first year of sobriety. I worked through them, and I was really motivated, and the obsession was removed immediately. And I had no cravings, and that was another spiritual experience and spiritual awakening for me. Working these steps is a spiritual awakening that gets to continue every day for me. All I needed was a beginning that first year to receive the promises. I had to just make a beginning on all those steps and do what was being asked of me to do. Having a sponsor, going to meetings, staying in the middle of the program, reading the books. Those are the simple actions that have produced incredible results for me. And the thing is that after my first year of sobriety, I got to start sponsoring others. And one of my sponsees is here today. She was my first sponsee. And this program, I'm sorry I've gone over. I could talk about it forever. I could spend a bunch of time in recovery. But there's been a lot of recovery, both periods of recovery in my life, and I believe in these steps so wholeheartedly. I can't even put it into words. It's my integrity has been restored. My peace of mind has been restored. I can walk through self-centered fear. I know that I'm not in charge, and I'm happy about that. I've surrendered to win, and I do that not just once, but every day, and sometimes several times a day, whatever's required. I'm happy about these. I'm happy that I can surrender to win, that I got to give it away to keep it, that it's through dying I've come to life. The grace of this program is phenomenal for me. It's phenomenal in so many of the people's lives that I've seen. And I'm thankful to be a part of it and to be able to tell you a little bit about my life. Thanks. I'll wrap it at that.